In this video, I'm going to show you how to subtract integers. If you need to look back before starting this one, I have already posted videos on adding integers and also on comparing, ordering, doing absolute value, and just in general what integers are. So for subtracting, you guys know, I'm sure, that subtracting is the opposite of adding. It seems pretty simple and basic. But if we focus on that simple and basic idea of it being the opposite, then it'll help us as we get into the more challenging problems. A subtraction sign or a minus sign is the same thing as a negative sign. It's the same thing as an opposite sign. So you'll see that carry through on all of these problems. The first one that I have here is 9 minus 6. We all know that's 3. But let's look at a number line to figure out why it's 3. So I'm going to start at the first number. I'm going to start at the 9. A minus sign or a negative or a subtract means I'm going to move left. So from that 9, I'm going to go backwards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you just want to figure out where you land. So if you just kind of number this as you go, if it's not already done, let's see, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, you land on 3, right? Because we know 9 minus 6 is a 3. We can do the same thing when we end up on a negative number. 5 minus 7. If you're taking away more than you have, you're going to end up at a negative number. You're going to go in the hole for your bank account. So I'm going to start at a 5, and I'm going to go left 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. To figure out where that is, just count backwards. You should find that you land on a negative 2. And then negative 1 minus 4. Same thing when you're starting on a negative number. Just think of the minus or the opposite or the subtract as moving backwards. So starting on a negative 1, go backwards 1, 2, 3, 4. You should find that you land at a negative 5. So that's all fine and dandy as long as you have smaller numbers. And I'm still working with smaller numbers right now, but if you get something really big, if you have negative 234 minus 376, I don't want to make a number line for that. So we've got to think about this in a different way so that we're not always relying on the visual of a number line. So what I always tell my students is to think about pulling the numbers apart. You write down what you see. In between each number, you say the word and. The word and really means plus. So really what we're doing is we're going to change these into addition problems. We're not going to change the value of the numbers. We're not just randomly going to make a minus sign into a plus, but we're going to rewrite the same numbers into addition. For example, what I mean by that, on this first problem here, I see a 3. So I'm going to write down a 3. And when I say the word and, I'm going to put a plus. If you think about covering the 3, after that, you see a minus or a negative 10. So I have a 3 and I have a negative 10. Now, if you think back to when we learned how to add them, 3 and negative 10, I have more negatives than positives. I have 7 more negatives than positives. So my answer is a negative 7. Negative 2 minus 12. I see a negative 2, so I'm going to write that down. And I'm going to put a plus sign when I say and. I also see after that a negative 12, that minus 12. Negative 2 and negative 12, altogether I have negative 14. The last one on this page, I see a negative 8, so I'm going to write down the negative 8. And I'm going to put a plus sign when I say and. I also, after that, see a minus or a negative 5. Negative 8 and negative 5 altogether is a negative 13. When I do subtraction of integers myself, even though I don't always, at this point in my life, write them out like this, that's the process that I always go through in my mind. Now, the one little exception to this, there is one kind of weirdo thing. When you subtract a negative, It's really telling you to do the opposite of a negative or the opposite of subtract. So like on this first one, it's saying take your 7, do the opposite of -2. So I'm going to add 2. So that really becomes 7 plus 2, which is 9. Now I have written up here in quotes a face problem. This is something that I mentioned in a video about opposites. I had one year a student tell me, Mrs. Luger, that looks like a face. And it took me a while to see it, but it's one of those things like the arrow in the FedEx sign. Once you see it, it's all you ever see. So look, here are 2 eyes, 2 like squinty eyes. And then here's the long curvy nose. It's a face. So what we always say in my class, when you have minus and minus, we always say, hey, it's a face problem. And we know in a face problem, those two come together to form a big plus sign. So that becomes 7 plus 2 is 9. So here's that face again. Here's my 2 squinty eyes and the nose. And we know a face problem, it turns into addition. So these 2 minus signs come together to make a plus. So then we really have -10 plus 6. I have 4 more negatives than I do positives. That would equal a -4. If you're asked to evaluate expressions, 7th grade math is like a pre-algebra. So you're going to start getting introduced to a lot more problems that have unknowns and variables. And one of those types of problems is to take something we already know and just plug numbers in or substitute them for the variables. I want you to be careful with these though, because as we have negative signs, it is so easy to accidentally miss a sign. So what I think will help you, rewrite your problem with blanks instead of variables or numbers. Put blanks and copy all the signs that you see. So B minus A, I'm going to put blank minus blank. Instead of B, I'm going to plug in the -2. And instead of A, I'm going to put in a 1. So this problem really says -2 minus 1. I see a -2 and I see a -1, or I'm starting at -2 on a number line and then I'm moving 1 to the left. I get -3. On the next one that says A minus B, I'm going to put blank minus blank. Here's why that's important. For A, it's 1. But for B, it's not just a 2, it's a -2. Now, really, you never want to have 2 operation signs right beside each other. So the proper way to write this would be with parentheses that just say, hey, look at me, I'm a negative number. And then look what we created. It's a face problem. So this really becomes 1 plus 2, which is a +3. The common mistake on that is to write down 1 and then I've got a -2 and get -1 because you end up missing that second negative sign. That's where blanks will really help you. On the third one here, I'm going to put blank minus blank minus blank. Instead of B, I'm going to put in -2. A is a 1. C is a -3. Here's another place where we don't want 2 signs right beside each other. So I'm going to separate with parentheses. Those parentheses just say, hey, look at me, I'm a negative number. So I see a -2 and I see a -1, and then face problem minus and minus turns into a plus. A -2 and a -1 is a -3. -3 plus 1 is a -2. Word problems for subtracting integers, a lot of times we'll talk about the difference when one is a positive and one is a negative. Honestly, they're trying to make sure you know that minus minus turns into a plus. So this first one says, the high temperature was 40 degrees. The low was -8 degrees. Find the difference. So the common mistake is to do 40 minus 8 and call it 32. But really, you're doing 40 minus -8. It's a face problem. The difference between those is 48 degrees. I'm a visual person with word problems. It helps me if I can do a diagram or something that I can actually look at and work with that's more than just numbers. So it's talking about temperature. Let's think about a thermometer. Here's just a basic, goofy little thermometer. Okay. We know we've got 0 on here somewhere. We know that the high temperature 40 is going to be way up above it. And we know that -8 is going to be below it. What it's really asking me for when it says difference is how many moves fit between them. So I know that it takes 40 moves to get from 0 to 40. I know that it's 8 moves between 0 and -8. So altogether, that's 48 moves. So my difference is 48. I'm going to do that same thing on the next problem. And even though it's not talking about temperature with a thermometer, I'm still going to use that vertical line to help me with a visual. So it says the highest elevation is 110 feet. The lowest is 28 feet below sea level. Below sea level means it's going to be a negative number. Sea level is considered 0 for elevation. So 28 feet below is really a -28. So just stick 0 on here somewhere. You're just doing this to help yourself, so it doesn't have to be in a perfect place. 110 is going to be up above it. -28 is going to be below it. And then again, difference is how many moves. So we're just trying to see what fits in between there. To get from 0 to 110, that's 110 moves. Between 0 and -28, that's 28 moves. So the total number of moves between them would be 138. Or if I had just set it up as a problem, take 110 minus -28. You don't want two operation signs right beside each other, so I'm going to use parentheses. There's my face. There's my eyes, my nose. That comes together to make a big plus sign. So again, you're going to get your 138. Okay, if you need more help with 7th grade math, feel free to subscribe to my channel. It's called Math with Luger. If you're one of my students or a parent or family member of one of my students, I do post classroom updates regularly on my classroom Facebook. It's not my personal Facebook. It's just for classroom updates, but that's Luger's math class. If you need to get in touch with me, there's my school email, so feel free. Or of course, you could always comment on the video. I hope this helps some. In the next video, we will be multiplying and dividing integers.